So joining us to discuss the significance of this and how gender-responsive tax systems empower businesswomen is Foluke Ademoku, Chair, Advocacy Committee, Association of Nigerian Women in Business Network. Thank you so much for taking the time out to join us today. Let's just jump right in. How would you define tax equity in the context of promoting women's economic empowerment?
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's good that we are having this conversation. I believe when you talk about tax equity, you are talking about fairness, you are talking about inclusion, you are also talking about transparency. You are looking at how our revenue from our taxes are socially distributed in a way that it meets the needs of society, men and women. But in this case, we are talking about women. We are looking at how revenue, support, public, policy in terms of services. We recognize that in society, even in our Nigerian society particularly, women are generally, poorer, than men because of entrenched, patriarchy, because of the discrimination that women, face, in different aspects of life. So we believe that when we're talking about the use, of taxation, we should be able to transparently, indicate, how these taxes are collected and how they are utilized in a way that will benefit those who have been excluded, in society, those who are unequally, served. And in this case, again, we are talking about women. So that's what tax equity, it's about. How can we make sure that every aspect, of society, men and women particularly, benefit, from the services, from the infrastructures that these taxes are expected, to provide? How can the tax empower women, to have benefits, from society, knowing well that at their level they also, contribute, to the making of these taxes, and there are some of their activities, productive activities that are not, are paid for, by taxpayers. So that's what equity is talking about.
Right. Thank you so much for that. Now, sometimes tax policies can either magnify gender gaps or alleviate them. When you think about Nigeria's tax system, where on the spectrum do we fall in terms of to what extent do we recognize the perhaps specific needs of women in business, etc.? What can you tell us?
Well, thank you. The Nigerian tax system, from our own understanding, from our own perspective, we think does not, consider the needs, the priorities of men and women, differently. It does not in any way, try to close, existing, gaps that we have seen, but in this case, gender gap. So it's concerning. And the most concerning aspect of this is that tax, officials, pride themselves with the saying that the Nigeria gender system is, Nigeria tax system is, it's gender neutral. And in being gender neutral, most times you can be gender blind because you are not open to how this affects, men and women differently. We recognize that we have very, big divide between men and women in society because of our culture, because of patriarchy, because of our socialization, process that has caged women and has restricted them, from getting sufficiently economically empowered. And that's why we have a large, scale of women who work in the informal sector. And these ones are the ones who bear the burden, of caregiving. They bear the burden of taxation because at that level, you see that taxes at local government, the Nigerian tax system is decentralized, federal, state, and local. And this provides opportunities for non-state actors, to abuse women. And that's something that we take seriously as women, entrepreneurs. And when I say women entrepreneurs, I mean women in business and women professionals. We take it seriously because there have been wide cases of abuse, and that's something that I'm happy that we are having this platform, to bring to the attention of Nigerians and also attention of the people who, take decisions,
right.
as regards the tax, system. And we're also looking at the issue of the bias in the tax structure. I've mentioned that revenue, how revenue, is utilized. We hear so much about tax expenditure. How transparent, is the way these tax expenditures are calculated and utilized? Has there been any, effort to make sure that there's a gender lens, that we deploy, to giving tax incentives to corporations who should be paying their fair share and they are not, paying it. We also look at the issue of tax collection and administration. If you look at those who are employed, in the tax system, the people who are the technical, experts, you see that you have more men than women, and this should be
right.
Concerning. It should be concerning, to everyone, who is in that.
All right, Foluke, if I could just come in here, in terms of, you've made some very key points there, but in terms of solutions, bringing this, taking these conversations further, especially with the government, can you share some major priorities that will be key in shaping the strategic advocacy goals where this is concerned?
First, I think it's important that the government begin to look at the issue of unpaid, care work. You see that women are the ones who, take care of this reproductive, function in the home, and it affects, their productive capacity because they spend so much time. They have time constraints, working on childcare, on giving care, to family, that they don't have so much time, even to educate themselves or to get involved in productive activity. We also, so why I'm mentioning that, I just want to give you an example. For instance, in housing, when we talk about housing, in Nigeria, government is involved in providing, in the provision of housing. But how many of these housing that government provided have washing machine, for example? Imagine if there was, they're using taxpayers' money in for that. Imagine if we had, a washing machine in some of these houses that government are building. You are taking some time, you are helping women to save time on the washing of clothes because they are the ones, who do that at home. The time they used to wash, clothes, or maybe you have a microwave in your oven. The time they will use, for cooking, that time can be conserved to do something more productive. They can earn more, from their, business. That's, in one way we can look at the issue of unpaid, care work. I'm just giving that as an example quickly. And also, we need to also look at the way revenues are shared. If you are talking about tax, expenditure, and you are giving incentives to maybe you give incentives to businesses. Can you target that at women, at the sectors that women are key players to help them grow? That's one area that I think government, will also need to, look at.
Right.
When we are talking about employment, in terms of employment, why are women running into the informal sector? It's because they do not have the space, to play in the formal sector. If you look at the data that we have, across the world, you have more men in the informal sector than, women. But looking at Nigeria, the opposite is the case. In Nigeria, we have more women in the informal sector